missing someone.
The Echo Cast, Episode 4. I didn't make a name for this one, so let's call it the Curious Rabbit episode, for absolutely no reason at all. I'll start this one off with kind of giving some updates on the channel, the content, things like that. I am going to do an episode of, a entry of Words with Bond, the interview series on myself. That it feels kind of weird to do that, but it's been requested, and according to all the questions we got, at least someone wants to read it, so we're gonna do it. If you saw on Twitter, I threw out a request for questions, and I think I have about 22 or 23. So it's definitely going to be the longest Words with Bond so far, because there's a lot of questions and I'm real chatty. So we're going to do that. I also sent out 3 or 4 of them. 1 to a cosplayer and 3 Ubisoft employees. So hopefully those get, at least a few of those get done. I don't know if the cosplayer is going to do it or not. She's very busy, so we'll see. And then I sent off requests to probably 7 or 8 other people, and got confirmations from about half of them that they would do it. And I just need to type up their questions. So kind of on the topic a little bit today of the speculation piece, which we'll get to in a bit. I am going to, I'm working on a video right now where I've picked 5 cities I think the Division 2 may take place in. And I'm going to basically break each one down, talk about the city, give some, use a map of the city, of what boundaries I think we would be playing in. Kind of, I think we're going to be playing like a 3x3, 4x4 mile square, where right now we're playing on about a 2x2. I'm going to do that. I'm going to break down the big landmarks, where missions, where like a base of operations sort of place could be. Obviously, all of that stuff is going to be assuming that it's a similar layout to now, which if you've listened to me before, you know I'm kind of saying that maybe expect things to be a lot different with the sequel. But when it comes to speculation on cities and stuff like that, rather than just making up a bunch of stuff, I'm going to do a video kind of thinking it's going to be in a similar template as now, even though it may not be. So we will see. So that's kind of it for the news with me, other than the new branding, which you actually can't see right now other than my logo, but we'll check it out when we do some live streaming. So for the State of the Game recap this week, it was pretty uneventful. I only caught the first, like, the news part of it. If there was anything at the end, I had to go. It was basically just kind of recapping the 1.8.1 release, which if you're watching this live, we will be jumping on and playing a bit after the podcast is over. They just kind of went over the stuff we already knew. So they did talk about the GEs a little bit, and talked about how the gear sets available on the next 2, the new ones, will not be the same as like the same orders as they were before. I wouldn't be surprised if they split them up like half and half. That's why they're giving us those specified caches as well, but we'll see how they handle that. One thing I didn't know that they talked about is the 100 GE credits per resistance boss. So if you do some of that resistance farming, those boss rounds are going to be somewhat profitable for you. And then the D-Tech drops and stuff like that in the daily and weekly assignments. I think most people knew about that, but just in case, I figure I would throw it out there. So they did some stats with Yannick. I honestly didn't catch any, and none really stood out to me and blew my mind. There is now an encrypted cache Mark III. I think that's interesting. So I do actually want to talk about that for a minute, because if you guys have already downloaded the patch, and you look in the collections, if you look in the Mark III collections, I am very curious about this, because if you look, when you unlock every item of one of the 5 new sets, it's Predmark, Hunter's Faith, Lone Star, and Final Measure. And then there's the MC Retro collection, which is, it's pretty cool looking. You get if you get all of the pieces of each of those sets, it's unlocking what's known as the Sentinel collection. So what I think is worth pointing out is that the first like bonus set was the Spacefarer, which obviously we don't have like a space gear set. It wasn't really lore, you know, it wasn't canon probably. It was just kind of cool or funny or whatever you consider it. The other one was the Rescue Operation collection, which had a cool hat, but that was about it. I don't know. This Sentinel thing is weird because it's got its own like little symbol. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating something that doesn't matter. But the Sentinel collection sure doesn't look like it's just some random set that they're deciding to give us. It looks like something definitely more related to the game. And I'm very curious if we ever see anything else involving this, maybe in the sequel or something like that. Because honestly, the logo is super cool. The outfit is really, really cool. I'm really, really curious, and I really want to unlock it because it looks pretty awesome. It's got like a 4-leaf clover kind of design. So that's it. I mean, that's the state of the game recap for me, at least. That's why I was able to catch of it, and I didn't see anything popping around that seemed like it was a lot more. There was a lot more information than that. As for the Division news in general, we have the 1.8.1 release. Obviously, we've talked about that quite a bit. The emoji agent thing, which has gone pretty well, and I decided to jump in and do myself. It was slightly embarrassing because my cosplay was a winter jacket, a scarf, a beanie, a backpack that only had one strap on, and me dabbing or sneezing, as they say. So there is a really good, if you look on the Ubisoft Twitter account, there's a really good look back article on the Division 1 where they talk to one of the head producers or directors. I forget what his title is, and I definitely can't say his name, so I'm not gonna even try. Kind of talking about the Division 1 and kind of how things went and how they think that's going to carry over to the Division 2. I know it's a controversial topic. I remember, you know, for a lot of time, many people calling for Massive not leading the Division 2 project. Kind of funny in hindsight to know that, you know, basically the day the first one released, they started working on the second. So when people were calling for them not to be the head, you know, like the lead on the sequel, it was just kind of silly because they were already deep into it. But regardless, it's a good article. I highly suggest reading it. If you go to the Ubisoft Twitter account, it's a good place to check it out. The only other news, and it's not really anything real big, it's the Australian outages yesterday. I guess I only probably really care about this because I've got a fair number of people who I'm friends with and that follow and all that who are Australian, and I was seeing that pop up a lot. And that was really obnoxious, but I do believe it eventually got figured out. They seem to be reasonably fast with that kind of stuff, but especially for a place like there where more than likely they have one bank of servers for the entire country. Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. So, rant number 1, or probably the only rant of the day, of the podcast, is in the community news section here. So, Agent Joe on Twitter asked to, in the Words with Bond questions, asked the question that I said, you know what, I'll ask one of your other questions in my Words with Bond edition, but I want to talk about that question, the first one they asked, on the podcast. So the question was, what do you think should change in the TD or the Division community? And they specified between players. So, if you keep up with my Words with Bond series, I just did a Thoughts with Bond on Medium, where I talked about relationships. So this question was, you know, very timely. And I kind of did like a general overview of at least how I see the relationships between devs and players and publishers and players and streamers and just kind of all of the intricate web of relationships that are just kind of a reality in the gaming world and industry right now. Like, do I think that there's still people out there who just go to GameStop and grab their game and go home and never look at a single piece of social media or anything? Absolutely. And they're probably better for it. They're probably happier people. Maybe, I don't know. I do think that the interaction has a lot of worth, but it's not always good. And I think most people would probably agree with that, at least to some capacity. But to this question specifically, what do you think should change in the Division community between players? So, if I had a wish list, the main thing I would say would be, what I would really like to see change is just the toxicity, obviously in general, but especially. So to me, there's like a bunch of these like really artificial or fake or like produced rivalries that are just unnecessary. They're just dumb, honestly. If you want my personal opinion, I think they're really stupid. And there's a bunch of them. PC players and console players. Even PS4 players and Xbox players, which is the one that boggles my mind the most, because we're all getting shit on by PC players, even though we outnumber them significantly. We just have lower resolution, which is a fair insult, I guess. But that one isn't even the worst. I mean, to me, the most toxic relationship since the game started, really since the game started making significant changes, for better or worse, have been the PvE versus PvP players. And and I throw these up for that. And what drives me nuts about it is that, there's bad actors on both sides, right? I mean, we all know that there's some PvP players who are just pure toxic, only care about the drama, only want to make little YouTube videos and stuff like that, talking shit about other people. And then there's PvE players who are like really just set in like one mindset of like, I want a PvE Dark Zone and I don't want anyone else there. And if it's not like that, it's stupid. If they don't do that in Division 2, the game's dumb. Like, what I've always said, whether it's politics or whatever, is that if you look at the far extremes of any topic, whether it's religion, politics, gaming politics, the far ends of the spectrum, the most extreme of whatever opinion. So, in politics, it'd be far left and far right, so liberal and conservative. In the video games, in the Division, it's PvE and PvP, or whatever. Those are always going to be the worst opinions to listen to, because they have no empathy, they have no forethought, they have no ability to see the other side and say, I get why you mean that, but this is why I mean what I'm saying. With the extremes of those kind of groups, you're getting nowhere. You're getting brick walls. You're getting nothing. The problem with that being, I've found, and maybe you disagree, and maybe I'm wrong, but those two groups tend to be the loudest. Those two groups tend to be the people you hear the most, because they make you hear them. They're loud and they support each other, and they'll retweet and like, and they'll just and what they do is they do a few things. I think they skew the actual community opinion a lot, or how it's perceived, and I think they make themselves seem a lot bigger, and I think they minimize the significantly larger group of people that fall somewhere in the middle. And the whole issue of like the PvE versus PvP crap that you see all the time is that I don't really know many people, at least I would say the average player isn't one or the other. I don't consider myself one or the other. I consider myself a PvE player, obviously, but I love PvP. Not really in the Division. I don't think it's that good. I think it's badly implemented. but I like PvP in general. I like that. Every other game I play PvP. I mean, I have since I started, since it existed. I guess for me, my first experience of PvP was freaking Rainbow Six and Blackthorn and Rogue Spear back in the day on my PC. Back when I played, all you had was a little cursor and some menus at the bottom, and you didn't see your feet or the gun or anything. That was and I loved it. That was the first significant gaming I did. And so I think what gets lost so much in this whole PvE versus PvP part of the community is that I don't think it even exists, personally. Like I said, there's always going to be those really loud outliers, but they don't really represent the average player, at least not in my opinion. And I'm not saying I represent the average player. I obviously don't in a lot of ways. But I guess, like, if you ever see me get in the tussles on Twitter and stuff like that, what I'm typically trying to point out is that while someone may have a strong opinion that they may perceive as fact, I guess I'm always kind of trying to be there, like, hey, maybe, I mean, I do typically play like a devil's advocate role, because I don't think it's a devil's advocate. I think it's the non-extreme advocate role that I try to tell people. Like, I don't know, but if there was something I think should change in the division, in the community, is it's that perceived rivalry between groups I don't even believe exist. There's this, you'll see it on Reddit, even on Twitter. Sometimes you'll see PvP players saying those damn PvE players ruined our PvP with all their balance changes, and you'll see PvE players and be like, oh, they don't care about us, they don't care about PvP players because those are all the streamers. And it's this, like, it's kind of like when there's like this mass murderer and everyone calls him a monster, and they dehumanize him, right? And because it's way easier to deal with it if you think something else isn't like you. If you have to recognize that the person who you disagree with, or who is awful in some capacity, is human just like you, well, that's hard. No one wants to handle that. So you see the same stuff even in like these arguments over a video game. You see people calling each other names and being really nasty, and it's really stupid. Because it's pointless. It doesn't improve anything. It doesn't help anyone. All it does is reinforce those far extreme people's opinions and make them think they're right, and it alienates the who I believe is the mass majority of the player base, who doesn't have those those really harsh opinions, or those really kind of rock-headed opinions about stuff. So, I mean, if I had to pick one thing, and then the other thing I would pick is, I would find a way to get the community to stop supporting people who are like illogically and undeniably consistently toxic. I don't have to name names, I don't have to say stuff like that. And if you like people like that, that's fine, that's you. But there's this weird, I think a lot of people remember, so many months or a year or so after the game came out, people were really frustrated, and they were justifiably frustrated. The game was in a rough spot for a long time, and even when it got better with 1.4 and stuff, it still had a lot of issues, and things still weren't perfect after that. And so, being someone who was only on Reddit until late last summer, early fall, when I first started kind of getting involved with all this stuff, I was only on Reddit. I was on Reddit and I was on matchmaking. And that was all of my interaction with the community. And what I noticed during that time was there was this moment where these really toxic people came out. And what was interesting about it is, at the time, it was well, these people are kind of speaking for the community. The community's frustrated. They're pissed. There's a lot of bad stuff going on right now. They don't feel represented. And so these people were really popular. And honestly, I didn't blame people for following them. But then things change, things evolve, and things get better. I'm still not going to say things are perfect, but there's issues that have been worked on, or that people will harp on things about some issues in this game, like encrypted caches and stuff like that just are kind of manufactured. And you'll see people, and that these people aren't stupid. And people know when they're harping on an issue, or when they're being really ignorant on an issue, they know they are. They're not dumb, but they know that's what that people eat it up, and it's that group of people. And I think it's a really large group of players and a really large group in the community of people who still really eat up that really like illogically toxic stuff. There's people who are critical of this game and critical of the devs and critical of people like even like me, who I respect entirely, who are logical and well thought out and are able to give credit where it's due. But there's also a lot of people who don't, whether it's deserved or not. And I really, if I could change anything, I would significantly implore that people not continue to support that kind of behavior. But this isn't a perfect world. People are going to do what they want to do, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. On the other hand, I think it's also, I really wish that we would focus more on, and I think we've been better about it as a community, focus on people who are really helpful and like the charity work people have done. I've been involved in a bunch of charity streams that I had nothing to do with. People just said, hey, will you stream? I did, and we had a lot of fun. It was great. But the people who actually organize that stuff, they deserve all of the attention and credit in the world. I mean, Timmy has been so amazing. That dude's really, really murdered it last year and then the last 12 months getting that stuff going. And then, even Pete, we did that really fun charity stream as well. It's, people are doing that really fun stuff. On the State of the Game, they just recently talked about a guy who helped like 100 people get commendations during the global events. So I also don't, I hope that we can focus on, people who are doing that kind of stuff. And I guess the last thing I'll say in this thing is I'm not opposed to criticism. And I get the word constructive criticism to a lot of people is going to sound like, well, just be nice to them and don't really be critical. That's not what I'm saying, but being constructive in your criticism is really important. There's guys like Frederick Dylander who, if you talk to him, if you interact with him directly, he actually doesn't want his ass kissed. If you really talk to him, he invites and loves this critical side of things because he wants to know why. See, that's the thing, that you can't go to him and just say PvP sucks, the metas are awful. He's gonna want more than that. Encrypted caches are pedo caches and they're awful and they're ruining the world. He would probably agree to some point, but he would want more than that, So those are the things I would say when it comes to what would I like to see be different. Those are them. Okay, well, on a less heavy topic, we'll just do a little bit of speculating this time because I did lots of ranting right there. So the speculation topic this time was like story speculation, in the sense of like what characters are still going to exist, what kind of stuff they might do with the plot, and stuff like that. So the big issue I have with speculating on that subject is it's really location dependent, right? You really need to know where the game is going to be in order to speculate on that. And that said, I think that there is, I think, what I believe is that we will, I think Faye will still be in the game. I would not be surprised at all if, because she kind of took over after that. I always try to call them vertibirds, but they're really ospreys, the VTOL helicopters that the commander was killed in at the beginning of the game, at the end of your Brooklyn part. I think she'll be promoted as the new commander or whatever, and that she's going to be sent to a new city because she did such a kick-ass job with New York. They're going to send her wherever we're going. I've talked about the cities I'm speculating, and I won't really bother more with that. But I would say she's a character we still see. I could be completely wrong. On Twitter, someone was saying that they think Keener is the only person that will still have anything to do with from the first game. Maybe. But what if we don't even know? What if he's gone? What if we actually don't even deal with him? I'd be pretty surprised. I think April Kelleher is going to make a comeback. I really feel like there were some pretty heavy hints in my words with Bond, with the author of that book, that it sure seemed like he was real motivated to want to continue that story. And if you guys keep up with him at all, you'll know that he was actually in Malmo not too long ago for a week. Maybe he was there for personal reasons, who knows? But he seemed really, really interested in continuing that story. And so I wouldn't be surprised if April is in there, even in a similar sense that she was in the first game, more as a depth character and less a, less a like main character. Like, we're not going to play as April. We'll probably never meet her, stuff like that. One interesting thing I did see someone talk about, though, was that they wanted to face off with Keener. I think it was Pete. And that'd be interesting. And the idea I had with that was, what if we face off with Keener in the sequel and we kill him? Only to find out that, because if you think about it, all Keener did in the first game was just take advantage of people who were dumber than him. He allied with people, and then he just took advantage of them, and he cut and run. Because he's a narcissist, he's probably a psychopath in some capacity, who just happens to be really intelligent as well. And the thing I mentioned on Twitter, though, was that people like that tend to gravitate towards powerful people that they can take advantage of. And I think the issue with that is that people like that tend, every dog finds a bigger dog, is the quote that I made, is that there's always a bigger fish out there. And I think it'd be pretty interesting if we face off with Keener and we kill him, we take care of him, only to find out that he teamed up with someone the way he did the LMB, only to find out that they actually were a bigger dog than him. They were a bigger fish, and now they're actually the bigger issue. Now they have his 3D printer and his information on the disease building and stuff like that. So I don't know. That's the direction I think it goes. I don't think that we'll see, and maybe Rick Velassi and those West Side Pier Intel recordings. I mean, he sure was talked about quite a bit. So it'll be interesting. I don't know. We'll have to see. But that's kind of how I feel about that. So this speculation wasn't quite as deep as it is sometimes, but you got me all riled up with the community question. So that's where we're at. That's what we're having. So some quick gaming news. We have God of War just came out. As Skill Up or Ralph has been telling people, watch your reviews. Watch it for spoilers. I'm actually looking for those because I'm not going to buy a PS4 as much as I would love to play that game. It's not in the budget, and I don't even have the time anyways. So I'll be looking for videos of walkthroughs of the whole game because I want to see what happens. It basically sounds like it's 30 hours of amazingness. There were a lot of 10 out of 10 reviews, and he's saying he thinks it's the best game of this generation of consoles, and he's talking like PS4 and Xbox One. So take that for what you will. I believe him, and it seems that way. So I'm curious to see what it's all about. There's a new battle royale out from the Lawbreakers people called Radical Heights. It looks like they have kind of taken like the aesthetic a little bit from Fortnite. They're kind of cartoony, but they're doing it in like an 80s way. But there's no building. It's a focus on gunplay. And I think that's a really interesting concept because there's a lot of people I know who I don't think anyone can deny that Fortnite is a rock solid game. And they're doing so much good work on it, and they're improving it so much so quickly. But a lot of people hate the super cartoony looks, and they don't like that it's not a 100% focus on shooting. The building mechanic throws a lot of people off. They don't like it. I don't mind it. I actually think that it creates a lot of skill gap. The really good players in that are always going to do really well because they just can do things better than you can. And you got to get better if you want to compete with them. I was playing quite a bit for a while. I've kind of dropped off of it a little bit just because I have other stuff to do. I still enjoy Fortnite, but I really, really think this Radical Heights game is really interesting. And I would like to check it out at some point, but I'm definitely going to catch others playing it as well. So in the more obscure story that I had was the King of Kong record has been stripped. If you've ever watched that documentary, I believe it's on Netflix, about the King of Kong, is a guy who broke this Donkey Kong record back in the day. But ever since, there's been this huge controversy that he cheated, put like mods in the machine he used, switched out like a logic board so he was able to more easily do stuff. The recording of it is all cut up and stuff like that. He didn't actually do it in front of anyone reliable. It's a really interesting story. If you look up King of Kong on Google right now, you'll see about it. The documentary is really interesting. It's basically gaming pettiness taken to the extreme, but people were passionate about making sure that the Donkey Kong record was truth. So check it out. It's an interesting story. I saw there's the Destiny 2 expansion coming in May. I've been seeing some of the people I know who like Destiny 2 or like Destiny in general, and maybe are a little disappointed with 2. Looking a little hopeful, seeming like by the end of the year and kind of a Division 1, kind of a Destiny 1 way, they're kind of getting back to what they should. I still think that there's a lot of room for criticism without all that, because the Division had lots of issues. It still does. And they fixed them, and Destiny 2 should be given that same chance. And sure, it should be, because people paid a lot of money for that game and want it to be good. But kind of the same way I feel about the Division 2, that Destiny 2 should have had all of the lessons from the first game in the second one, and it obviously didn't. Like, not even close, right? So it's a criticism I have for the Division 2 as well. Not a criticism, but a warning that if they make a lot of the same mistakes in the Division 2 that they made in the first one, they will not get any slack for it. As much of a fanboy and as much as I'm called a lot of things in some certain videos, very passively, even I would not be forgiving of that. I can understand realistic development cycles and issues and fixes and how those take time, but they for the betterment of the game sure better have learned lessons a lot better than Destiny did. That's kind of what I'll say about that. So then the last little bit here, that Red Dead Redemption got the 4K update on the Xbox One X. I have that. I haven't downloaded it yet. I will be, because that game looks, I can only imagine what it's going to look like being upgraded like that. And already, honestly, still, I was playing it earlier this year or late last year, and it honestly still didn't look that bad. I thought it still looked pretty good. The facial animations and stuff are still really solid. And so I'm really excited to check that out. If you have that game, or if you want to go buy it, and you have an Xbox One X, do know that you will that you'll get that. And I suspect it's going to look pretty good. So that's about what we have this week. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it was informative and interesting. I'm interested and terrified to see the comments. And if you have any comments of your own, jump into my Discord. Reply to me on Twitter. You can even reply in SoundCloud if that's how you're listening to this, or on YouTube. Let me know if you have topics you want me to cover. Let me know. I want to hear it. If we can. I'll rant all day if you give me a chance, and if someone will listen, then great. But other than that, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. We'll have another one next week, and until then, this is Bond Diesel.